What's going on, everybody? How are we doing? It's LibThims here, and today we're going to be looking at the Samos Cup alphabet, a diagram which I made yesterday showing the 27 number letters of the Samos alphabet made in 2610A, and we're going to be looking at all of these diagrams to explain where each letter came from, its Egyptian parent character, and how the Egyptians coded the alphabet in terms of the circumference of feet of the earth, and also how Osiris, as a mummy, grew in the first 14 letters or 13 letters as plant. Then he was cut up into pieces as crops, and then he became a mummy and was risen like the Orion constellation at the 25th letter. So here's some of my alphanumeric library. These three books were the main ones that allowed me to decode all of these letters. Fidelers, Jesus Christ, Son of God, talks about the alphanumeric geometry of, say, Apollo Temple in Greece. Barry has the biggest alphanumerics dictionary, or dictionary of Isopsephy, that's been made, 56 pages. You can see it's so worn out. I had to tape the spine down with duct tape. It's barely holding together. And then Gadala's Egyptian alphabetical letters put me on to the Leiden I-350 papyrus, which explains that there has 28 stanzas to the god Amun, numbered exactly the same as the Greek alphabet letters. So it's ordered like this. So to begin with, the Samos Cup is the seventh oldest abecedary. So abecedary means plural, letters ordered like an alphabet, and abecedarium is the singular form of the word. We're just going to use the word alphabet. And it was found in Samos, Greece, the birthplace of Pythagorus. And it's the first alphabet found that has 27 number letters, which means that it goes up to the value of 900. And Samos was found, or Samos is part of the so-called purple part or math type of Greece. It's an island right here. So all of these letters in purple, according to the Kirchhoff division of the Greek states in their use of letters, is called classic Ionic. And it goes all the way up to omega plus, which is value 800, plus Sampi, which is value 900. Whereas some of the green colors here are the original Phoenician alphabet, which has 22 letters, which goes up to the Phoenician Chai, which stops at 22 because 22 divided by 7 gives you a closest approximation for pi, or 3.14. And then we have the red or Western type. So the red type is what actually became pre-Latin. And Latin is not very mathematical. They invented their own numbers. And here's Samos, Greece, just to give you an idea of what it looked like when Pythagoras and whoever invented this alphabet, or this cup, was resided. So next, we're going to go over here, and we're going to go through each letter. So if we go to the expanded page here, or to begin with, here's a map of where the abecedaria are found. So we see that the in the years 2500 or 3100. We see the Fayum plate alphabet, or abecedaria, is found here in the Fayum oasis. That's the oldest one. Then we have the two Phoenician abecedaria. The Zayat stone was found here, and the Isbet abecedaria was found here. And then we have Samos Cup was found right here, and here's the Samos alphabet. That's the island right here, and there's also the 28-letter Oop Al Linos tunnel. They're carved in a tunnel that they made here. And there's the 5-letter ABGDE shard that was found in Greece. There's the very abecedarium that was found here in Greece. We have the Marsiliana tablet, which goes from A, left to right, to Psi. And then we have the Espansia tablet that was made in 2500 A, that goes from A to Sampi, the 27th letter. So while we have this map out, the new hypothesis here is that during this period, what was called the Sesotris Empire, which is shown here, King Sesotris, according to Herodotus, conquered all the lands along the Nile. He conquered the Ethiopians. He rode ships, conquered everybody along the Red Sea from the Arabian Gulf. He conquered the Scythians, which are these people. He conquered the Colchians, and he went up and conquered the Thracians. So he could have, and we're also told by Pythagoras that he left his troops behind and as a stationed at, this is Phasis River, and he left his troops here. And then Pythagoras, when he met these people, said that they had woolly hair and black skin, and he thought that they were Egyptians. And also, so what this tells us here is that possibly Sesotris conquered all the way over to Portugal. He might have conquered all this land over here, plus Greece, but we don't know. But the new conjecture that I've been working on the last week is that Sesotris, to reform or unify the new empire, instructed his engineers and priests and scribes to make a new simplified or reduced Egyptian alphabet that could be contained in 28 characters that contain the entire story and cosmology of Egypt, and also would be used as a universal script that people in different parts of the world, such as the Thracians, the Greeks, Cocleans, the people in Arabia, could use as a new alphabet. And here's the Leiden I3 papyrus. So this is numbered 1 through 28, and it has 28 lunar stanzas, and they're numbered 1 to 1,000, just like the Greek or the cubit ruler here. And this cubit ruler is the Amenemhotep cubit ruler from 3250A. So all the Egyptians' pyramids were built with these cubit rulers, and they had 28 characters. So the theory is that this is Sesotris made a universal script, just like the Romans made everybody read Latin, and Latin is now the world's universal language that people until 100 years ago had to learn in colleges as required reading. So before that, people had to learn this new 28-character lunar script as required reading during the period of the Sesotris Empire, and that this is how the alphabet spread outward into all the parts of the world. So we're going to start now with letter A. Or actually, before we start now, we're going to take a look at exactly how did someone or the person who made this Samos Cup alphabet right here, how exactly did this go from Egypt, there are 700 plus hieroglyphs plus 6 numerals, 4 of which are shown here. It's I. This is the cow yoke is 10. This is the ram horn is 100, and lotus is 1,000. And then 10,000 is Harpocrates, or the child with his finger at his mouth. And then 100,000 is the frog. And then million is the so-called Hagad with his hands, 2 hands in the air. But we really only need to worry about these 4 letters, because this became I, this is R to the present day, and then 1,000, the lotus became A with a mark above it, meaning that it's a 1 to the, it's 1,000 reduced as 1, something like that. So the prevalent theories as to how the alphabet got here, or got from Egypt to Greece, or where letter A came from, is that the Phoenicians taught it to them. So here's a picture of, it's the legend of Cadmus teaching, supposedly one person came over and taught the illiterate Greeks the alphabet. So this is the myth that was taught to the Greeks. And people still believe this to the day, to presently. So Plutarch is the first one to talk about the origin of letter A in his Convivial Questions. And he says, putting in the mouth of Ammonius, he said that Cadmus, as the story goes, placed alpha in the first order. So he placed alpha here because a cow, or B-O-Y-on, boon or boos, is called alpha by the Phoenicians, or Phonicas. So this myth is reported that A had something to do with cow in the year, or to the Greeks. And Herodotus likewise talks about, he gives the earliest report of Cadmus, who came over and taught the Greeks the alphabet. But he also says, Plutarch's grandfather, Lampros, his grandfather said that what he believed was that the first articulate sound that is made is alpha for air in the mouth, because it is formed and fashioned by the motion of the lips, and that this is the first sound that is made by children. So this is the first correct thing that we found regarding letter A. So if we go to the Amenemope cubit ruler, and pretty much every cubit ruler has the shoe air filler as the second unit. And this circle dot here, which we're going to talk about here shortly, which I'm conjecturing to believe is Philae Island, is at an island in Nome 1, which means it's the first alphabet letter. We also know that Kenome makes the first human at Elephantine Island, which is, again, about 4 or 5 miles from Philae Island. So we also know that the first humans were made to do the works of the gods. So we can conjecture that letter A, Nome 1, the first humans were made, and this is the circle dot. But we also know that this is here we see Philae Island, and the Egyptians believed that there was a Philae Island on the ground, and there was also a Philae Island in the stars. So this is the pole pointing upwards to the pole star, and A got associated with letter A from the circle dot, which is also Polaris in the star, which is the Little Dipper rotating around Polaris. Like this when you look at the stars at night. So there's a Little Dipper rotating around the stars. Then they also believed that gnomes 1 through 7 were shaped like the Little Dipper. And they called this the Mishtu tool, which is where letter L comes from. So they believed that this rotated on the ground, or this was the ocean version of the Earth, which formed letter L on the Earth, and there was also the one in the stars that rotated around. So the circle dot here, we're conjecturing that this circle dot got moved to letter O, and then the air or shoe god got moved or merged with letter A. So this is all just mythical. We also know that Cadmus, when you break his name down, and if you read his story in, there's Henry Adams here, got the two thinkers. If you read in Ovid, the story of Cadmus, see right here, chapter story of Cadmus. If you read chapter 3, you would go through and you see that this is all a rescript of the Egyptian version of the Nile. So Cadmus is actually the Egyptian Thoth, and they use his myth as a way to teach the Greeks where letters came from. So in his name we see the name Adam, A-D-M, which is what the Jewish version was used to say was the first human. And then, so he has to pull half of the snake teeth and plant them, and it grows 5 Spartans. And these are in Greek, in Egyptian, these are the 5 apegamental children, which we'll talk about, which is where letter E comes from. So I'll move the shoe for right now, as it's distracting. But just remember that the shoe is 12 inches presently, and then it starts at letter O, which is the 16th letter. So 1 foot equals, or 1 shoe equals 16 digits. We'll talk about that shortly. So here we see that Cadmus he has to reap first he has to hold the ground. If you read Ovid's chapter 3, first he has to hold the ground, then he sows the ground with the snake teeth, and then he reaps Spartans. Or actually, if you read the story, they fight among each other, and they kill all of each other except for 5 survive. And he also has to consult the oracle in the Delphi oracle. So this is a rescript of Egyptian mythology. So that is the Cadmus myth. Now the first person to actually conjecture how this was taught to the Greeks beyond the myth of Cadmus, who's not a real person, coming over was Barry Powell, and he says that there was one person, which he calls the mediator, which was a Phoenician, who came over from Greece so here's Phoenicia is over here, and he said this mediator traveled this way over here to Greece, and he was one single person, and he taught one Greek who Barry Powell calls the adapter. I know theory is just a joke, but at least someone has put forward a theory. And then this adapter taught out the Greeks the alphabet. And you can see here, this book is good because it has a lot of factual references, and he talks a lot about some of the early scripts and the early records of Greek letters. Now building on, so that's the Berry Powell model. Now the next model is that there was advanced by Alan Gardner. And he wrote this short article, 25-page article, called The Egyptian Origin of the Semitic Alphabet. So he says that first it was Petrie who went to these mines, and these Cerbit el-Kadam. It's this little dot right here, and he found these markings. This is a small, not more than 2-inch sphinx, and he found these 3 little letters, and he said these were alphabetical. It was Petrie who loosely conjectured these were alphabetical, and then Gardner went ahead and wrote this whole article. And he said that, in particular, because, as we saw over here, that Plutarch said that letter A comes, he says that alpha comes from the cow, which is the Greek version, that there is a mark number 345 on these cave walls. This is the Cerbit el-Kadam. It's a little, supposedly it was a small Hathor temple. You can see Hathor here, and there's Egyptian stela, more Hathor characters, and they mined turquoise here. Now supposedly Gardner looked at all these scripts, and he said that this ox head that was carved on the wall is the source of letter A. And so almost 99% of people believe this model like it's verbatim, like it's proved or something. And here we see all of his characters. So this is incorrect, but it has had a profound influence on everybody. So this was eventually modeled into this model by Orly Goldwasser. In 2010, she published an article, or she's a professor of Egyptology in University of Jerusalem, and she published this theory that these miners who were illiterate, they weren't slaves, but they were Jewish or Semitic miners, as she calls them, and they looked at these hieroglyphs, which means they looked at these hieroglyphs, they couldn't read these, but they used this, things like the ox head here, such as ox head number 345, and they said, okay, we'll just make this letter A, and that's where letter A comes from. So pretty much everybody on the planet right now believes this completely retarded theory. But here's a map of it right here. So this is a video from YouTube by Simcha Jakobich, who invented the alphabet. So he says there's also another model by John Darnell, who says that there was another group of Semitic traders, or I think he says Egyptian warriors or something, but this is Wadi el-Hel. So the new theory is that there was a migration of the alphabet from these over here to the Cerbit el-Kadam, and then these Cerbit el-Kadam people went over here and taught the Phoenicians, and the Phoenicians then went and took their alphabet from Cerbit el-Kadam to here, and then Cadmus went over here and taught the Greeks. So that's pretty much what people believe right now. So as far as I know, I'm the first person to definitively say that A is not 100% based on a hoe, but it's almost certain. It's 98% for sure based on the Egyptian hoe. Because as I've learned, you cannot really say for sure that this is 100% based on each of these letters, because there's always going to be room for error. So here's one example. This is Gardner's number 345, carved on the walls of Serabit al-Khatam, on these, somewhere in one of the caves of these ruins, that Petrie wrote down. And so then Gardner said that this is where letter A comes from, and everybody on the planet believes this. Now, on these same walls, or in the same article, there's also the Egyptian hoe. Now, when I pulled, a few months ago, I pulled the preschooler sub, and 20 parents had 20 of their 4-year-olds, when they woke up in the morning, asking them to pick which one made more sense, or which one was the best version, which one matches letter A better. And they showed their kids this, and 95% of the kids picked this version. Whereas, and I also pulled some of the hieroglyphics sub, there are languages, and some other subs with this one, and the adults picked this one. So they're up pretty much. This is an example of what happens when you get brainwashed by, you believe it's been officially proved or whatever. So children know that this is stupid. This is not a dead inverted oxide. Does not make A. So here we see this is the Scorpion 2A, and we have a 97% match. And this is 5100A. And so this is a mace head he would beat people on the head with. So it's a sign of imperial power, meaning that the way the Egyptians ruled the Nile was that they divided the land into farming plots, and each farmer paid a percent tax to the king, and then the king used some of that money to form a government, to assemble an army, and also to make universities. And then this is coded into the alphabet, where this is where you grow your crops through 14, and this explains some of the things like the weighing of the soul and how laws are defined by Osiris. And so they use this system spread over here as a way to have power from the hoe, because it was a symbol that you would get taxes from those who would grow the crops. Now, where the hoe comes from is that it's based on the flood cycle when you do the hoeing. So the Nile floods in June, July, and it floods for 150 days. And then when the flood recedes, you hoe over here, which is letter A, that's the start of the year. Then you sow, which is letter E, and then you reap, which is letter M, where you cut the crops. So when you cut the crops, that means you're cutting the body of Osiris. Just like in the Christians, when I was a child, I'd eat the body of Christ. The wafers, that means I'm eating the body of Osiris, or the body of Jesus, which is the mummy risen as the Orion constellation. Okay, so we've done that one. Now we're going to get... So another problem we have here is that how did the feather get, like Plutarch's grandfather Lamprey said, A is air. So that we also see that there's a feather here. on this is the Osirkon cubit ruler feather, which is the second, which is shown second like this. And that is that, I guess we'll look at that shortly, and what's called the Sumerian Song of the Hoe. The air god called Enlil splits the earth. Oh, here it is right here. In the Song of the Hoe, Enlil is the god of the air. And to separate earth from heaven, he has a golden lapis lazuli silver hoe, which he cleaves the two of them apart. So in the Egyptian version, Shu is the air god, and he cleaves, and his wife is Tefnut, which is moisture, which is supposedly created by Atum, the first god, which is over here. And he splits Jeb, the earth, from Nut, which is the heavens. And that's where the hoe became, how it became letter A for Shu. Over here we see Osiris cutting up, or this is Set cutting up Osiris into 14 pieces, which are the first 14 letters. And he throws them into the Nile, as Plutarch told us. And here is this hoe. It's made of gold, silver, and lapis lazuli. So that's how A became the air element to Empedocles. And it was the feather, the ostrich feather, which is the lightest thing that blows around in the air to the Egyptians. And the hoe became the symbol because you can write, to make all these letters, you had to have simple characters that could be written on rocks. So it's real complicated to make a feather on a rock, whereas these you had to find a symbol that would represent the first letter of the alphabet, or the first number letter. So they chose the ho, which was easy to write. So now we're going to go to letter B and G. So this is Egyptian erotica of Jeb with an erection and Bet on top of him. And the N1 is the Bet hieroglyph, and Jeb is the goose. But the person who wrote this is using the Jeb as the erection. So there's his back, there's his ball sack right here, and there's his erection like this. And this is at a 72-degree angle, which is the normal male erection angle. This is where the Phoenician G comes from. But because the Greeks, such as Pythagoras and the people at Samos, were mathematical, they converted this to 90 degrees. So that the erection part would be 3, the back became 4, value of 4, and this value right here became the 5 apogamental children, making the Pythagorean triangle. So then right here we see Bet, Nut as she's called in young Champollion phonetics. So we see her breast there. We see that that's the delta side view where the sun is born in the morning. There's Shu, which is A. So Shu became A. There's Bet, which is right here. And there's Jeb with the direction removed because people don't like to look at pornography anymore. And here we see the Norris stone Phoenician B, where they drew nipples on the breasts. So you can see the woman bent over, there's her breasts, and this became B. Now here we see the Pef to Jew Neath coffin. And here we see the delta, which is letter D. So the first Phoenician Ds were drawn not triangle like we normally draw the Greeks. The Greek delta looks like this. The first Phoenician Ds were drawn like the female triangle area. And this is one from Egypt, from the Badera people in 6200 A. And this is called the perfect birth theorem. So the way this works is this is Bet's triangle, or Bet's delta. Now, Shu put a curse on Bet and Jeb that they couldn't have children in any day of 360-day year. So let's get some paper here so I can draw this out. Here's the Earth right here. This is the Medi, according to the Egyptians. The Phasis. The Mediterranean is over here. The Phasis River is over here. And the Nile River is over here. And this is called the TO map. And this is how Pythagoras, or Thales, went to Egypt and he studied there, and he came back and he taught the Greeks this model of the Earth. The Earth was divided into 3 continents and it was separated according to 3 T-shaped rivers. So this is where the letter T comes from, and that's why all of the languages on each of these 3 continents all have the same phonetic word for 3, whether it's in Sanskrit, Latin, or Greek. And so Shu put a curse on Bet and Nut that they couldn't make any children in any of the 360-day years. So the circle was 360 degrees. So the circle is 360 degrees divided, and that's how many days the original Egyptian year is. Well, as we know, the real year is 365. So the normal year is 365. So they needed to have 5 more days, plus 5 days, to make a 365-day year. So where these 5 days come from is that Thoth won. He was playing a game of Senate with the moon god Khonsu, and he won over 72 parts of the moon. It's light. So you multiply 1 over 72 by 360, you get 5 days. So with those 5 days, there's the sliver of the moon. Bet was able to birth the 5 apegomental children, which came out at E. So these are the five children here. Set is 1. Isis is 1. Nephthys, Horus the Elder, and then there's Osiris. So it became G squared is 3 plus D squared, 4 squared is 9 plus 4 squared is 16 equals E squared, which is 5, gives 25 Egyptian letters that Plutarch talked about. And here again we see the delta, birthing the sun on Bet, who's above here. And it comes out as Omega, or Hathor, who's the house of Horus. There's number 10 from the cow yoke. And there's the letter I. This became I in Egyptian. And it's something like a lightning bolt that comes out of Bet. And this also became Thor in Nordic Horus. So here's another view. bat birthing the sun, or we see B and D. Okay, so now why do we have two phalluses here? Took a little while to figure out, but since we have, this is ho, this is sow, and this is reap. And so if we look up the word seed in hieroglyphics, we find this. So seed in young Champlain phonetics is called mit, what, or something like that. It's probably not correct, but over here we see the three E's, and then the Osiris making seeding like you'd seed children, but it became a metaphor for seeding people and for seeding plants. So that's where letter E came from. So it's three E's bent down at three angles, three phalluses bent down at 72 degrees, and it's a metaphor for seeding, but it's a little more complicated because it also has to do with the rebirth of the Osiris through three different enads. There's one enad, another enad goes up here to 90, and there's a third enad. So for example, when they cut King Tut's tomb open, he was found mummified in a triple layered sarcophagus with gold on the outer surface. And also in Delphi, as Plutarch writes, in his Moralia on Isis and on the E at Delphi, they hung these letter E's. We see the word Telios plus Lane equals is a cipher for Delphi. So you see that there's delta, and then Delphi is a cipher, and these are all coded alphanumerically. And they hung three of these in the temple where Plutarch supposedly was a priest. And here we see, this is the self-reported erection male of men. And we see that 30 to 85% of men are between these angles, which means that over here, 70, this is where the shape of the angle of letter E comes from. It's angled like the normal 72 degrees or 60 to 60-ish angle was where the original E's came from. And there's bet and not again, there's D, there's B, there's another example. So these were all made all over Egypt, and this is how that this Samos Cup individual knew how to write these letters. And then F is something like seed, but not as fertile seed, like you don't make as much crops, you don't have as many children. And it also has to do with Set, because Set is the god of the red desert, and so he's the adversary of growing crops. So if we look over here, Set is the 8th god on the Orsicon cubit ruler. We see the feather is the second one, but if we shift out this circle dot, like we've conjectured that presently that it got moved to O, then all of these get shifted left, and then Set becomes 7, which is where he is presently in the Greek alphabet, and then A becomes 1. And then B gets moved to the second letter, G got moved to the third letter. Lastly, we have letter eta, And this is tum uj. It's 4 marks on the top, 4 marks on the bottom, and this became letter H, or number 8, and it's dated to 53. It's one of the oldest letters, and it looks like this. So if you look up the city of Hermopolis, you'll see that there's this symbol in the name of Hermopolis. It's the city of Thoth. So number 8 became these marks, became the 8 Ogdoad gods, which are pairs of frog and snake water gods pairs. And this became the Fam H, Isbet H, Marceliana H. Now we're looking at, this is what the one we're doing today is the Samos H, Viterbo H, and this became eventually Latin H. The last letter here is theta. So this is the Samos Papyrus from 3000A. Here we say 9 rays of sun. Going here represented the 9 gods of the Enad. Which are, here we see a tum blowing out, Shu and Tefnut. So the tum is sort of like the pre-letter. There's the 8 Ogdoad gods, which makes H. Okay, so here we go. If we go over to 9, there's the Enad. So these 9 rays of the sun are representative of the 9 Enad gods. These figures are said to be the 8 Ogdoad gods, holding letter A's. And according to Hermopolis recension, the Ogdoad birthed the Enad. That occurred in about 4000 A. And so this is another reason why we have letter A as the first letter. Yet at the start of the cosmos, these Ogdoad water on the outside made 8 humans, or 8 males that do the hoeing. These are workers for the gods of the Ogdoad. And this is where theta comes from. So if you will look up the word thermo, we see this. This is the full papyrus, the Samos Papyrus. I cut out all this stuff to make the theta, but originally it looks like this. So we see the hoe. We see these goddesses pouring the waters of the Ogdoad over. And this is letter Phi. So there's 1 sun, 2 suns, another sun, which corresponds to 8, the 1 value sun, 10 value sun, 100 value sun, or maybe the 1000 value sun. But this letter is Phi, which is right here. And it's Ptah. You spin the wood and make the ashes, and the phoenix is born from the ashes. So this lights the sun. This is a flame, which becomes the ram horn sun. This is letter R. And we see letter R and the tum uj ram horn, which is number 100. And this is where the phoenix comes from. And Ptah is letter Phi, because his name, P-T-A equals 110, and then Phi also equals 110. Phi plus 10. So that covers the first 9 letters. Now we're going to cut this video and take a break and come back and do the second part.